All right, we are live. We are live, and I'm coming at you with 5. Welcome to another ride, y'all. Gavin Richard presents on my channel, GBoot2786. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you all are enjoying this beautiful Thursday. Here, it's raining in New Orleans. I don't know what the weather is like over there in the Bronx. Shawn, how's it over there?
It's a little overcast over here.
Okay. It's raining over here. They've had tornado warnings all over Slidell and so forth, which is on the North Shore. But right now, it rained earlier. I don't know if it's coming back, but it looks like it's moving away. So, guys, you all know this gentleman here. He has been a guest on my show multiple times. I'm always honored to have him on. The author and screenwriter and blogger himself, Shawn James. Shawn, of course, is the author of the book The Man Crisis. He's also authors the John Haynes series and the ISIS Papers. Not ISIS Papers.
Series.
ISIS series. Sorry, the ISIS series.
The Main Event, which is out now.
Okay. Yeah, and Shawn, we thank you for coming on, man. I'm glad you're doing okay and doing well. We're going to talk tonight about Screenwriting 101 with Shawn. Now, of course, however, on side of that, I did want to get your opinion on some things that are going on. Shawn, I'm curious though, how is New York right now with the coronavirus pandemic? I know that in certain states, like here in Louisiana, we're starting phase 1 come May 5th, after the May 15th date. How is that going in New York right now? Are there any talk of reopening?
It's still tense. They're talking about reopening other parts of the state, but New York City is not going to probably open until June, from what I've heard.
Okay, yeah, I heard Los Angeles and the Los Angeles mayor talking about 3 more months of home quarantine. I just saw on the news in Wisconsin that the Supreme Court overturned the governor's order, and they had people already out there just packed with, locked armed and armed in bars and so forth. And who knows if this thing is going to spike up again.
Well, there will be a spike because you have a lot of people who are at home for long periods of time, and when they start to come out, there may be a short-term spike. So that's going to happen no matter what it is, because when you have people who have been isolated for long periods of time, then they go back out into the environment and they're exposed to these germs, you're going to have that. But there's nothing anybody can do about that.
Right. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. There's nothing you can do. Now they're talking about you can get it in the eyes, which is just crazy, man. It's crazy. I've heard different stories. Even I don't know how true it is about the virus possibly has mutated. If you've seen the movie, not Contagion, everyone talks about that with Matt Damon, but even before that, the Outbreak movie with Morgan Freeman and Dustin Hoffman, it kind of reminds me of that a little bit.
Well, I never saw that movie, so I don't know what
it's on. It was on Netflix. You might want to look at it later tonight if you get a chance.
All right, I may take a look at it.
Yeah, I'm surprised you never haven't seen that one. That was 95.
Well, I didn't have any money back in 95. I was out of school.
Oh, okay.
I was looking for work, so I didn't have money back then.
Okay, well, it's all good, man. Well, hopefully you get money now, bro. And selling all of those books, I'm real proud of you. So that's good.
Okay, thank you.
I also wanted to talk with you, Shawn, your thoughts about what happened in Georgia with Ahmaud Arbery and that shooting. What do you think of that shooting, and what do you think is going to happen as a result?
Well, I think it's a very, very sad tragedy. And it's a very sad tragedy because this young man lost his life just going out and walking out and about. So what's really sad is that almost a decade after the murder of Trayvon Martin, we still have black men getting murdered by these dysfunctional beta males out here who want to mark their territory. And we really should have done something about that back in 2012 with George Zimmerman. I mean, Barack Obama he dropped the ball on that, because we could have stopped that type of murder and that type of trend of murder had his Justice Department and his Attorney General at the time, Eric Holder, filed federal civil rights charges against George Zimmerman. Because had he done that, that would have sent a message to all of these other beta males out here that they cannot just just murder a black man just for any sort of for no cause at all, except for them coming into the territory that they so-called marked.
Well, Obama definitely did not do a great job as far as I was concerned for the black community, and he was too busy, obviously, having beer summits with racist cops and decorating the White House in rainbow colors. But of course, you talk to a lot of black people about that, especially the older black generation. You're like, oh, well, he had a racist Congress. He was the first black president. You couldn't expect him to do more.
Well,
He's the president of all of America, not just black America.
well, I'll give them an example. Your George H.W. Bush managed to do something about the 4 police officers who beat up Rodney King.
Yes.
So if he could do that, then why couldn't Obama do something about George Zimmerman?
Well, I will just say this: it's not a cop out. George Zimmerman wasn't a federal or state police officer or federal officer, so he was a private citizen. So the rules may have been a little bit tougher to get. But I even look at what happened with Michael Brown. I look at what happened with Tamir Rice. I look at what happened with the brother that got shot in Walmart with the BB gun, Jordan Crawford. And those were all examples of, police shootings. And yes, I think Barack Obama could have, as executive branch of the federal government, he could have put more pressure to cut funding, for these police officers who get monies, by the way, from the government to build up their arsenal. We're talking state-of-the-art equipment that they receive. I've seen examples of cars that shoot out sonic waves and so forth that they've actually get, to back up a large crowd. All of that comes from the government. So yeah, Obama, I felt he could have done more. And, my understanding, even if you remember with the Trayvon Martin case, he didn't say anything about it except everyone just respect the verdict. And probably like a week later or sometime later is when he gave that passionate statement about how Trayvon could have been my son, or, explaining racial profiling. And a lot of people, including the analysts here in New Orleans on WWL, which is a conservative network, by the way, very racist, but they were all surprised too themselves, because they say the president is one of I think some presidential historians that came on said he's one of the few presidents to actually not deal with race. He tried to avoid all of that.
Yeah, but it just showed that his ineffectiveness made things worse, because had he done something about some of this stuff, he might have been able to actually cement a solid legacy. The irony is that he thought by avoiding it, he would be able to protect his legacy. But had he done something, he would have cemented his legacy. And I also believe he would have been able to actually stop Donald Trump's momentum. But he didn't want to do anything about it. And that's why we have this young man losing his life almost 10 years after the murder of Trayvon Martin.
It's also why we have Donald Trump in office. And I think had they done more, it would have really turned out voters. But people were disappointed with the, if you want to protect my legacy, excuse me, you're worried about your legacy, Mr. President? You're like, your legacy wasn't for us. And, and I saw Michelle Obama's comments from the Becoming documentary, and I saw your take on it that you posted, where you didn't even show your picture, which was a rarity. You just had a Batman, the Batman sign with his head down, like, oh Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't feeling well that day, so I had to put that up.
Yeah, well, so you saw the documentary that Michelle Obama did.
Yeah, I haven't seen the documentary, but I read articles on it, and I wasn't happy with the way she condescended to black people. And that's the big problem with many on the left, is they continue to condescend to black people, and they want to blame black people for the failures of their political party. But the problem is their political party does not listen to the black community. And because they do not listen to the black community, this is why a lot of black people became disillusioned after Obama's presidency and just decided to stop voting in 2016 and 2018, and why we're going to have a low turnout in 2020, because when it comes down to the left, they take the black voter for granted, and they don't come to the table with tangibles to offer to the black voter. Now they'll go to the alphabet people with a group of tangibles. They'll go to the illegal immigrants with a tangible. They'll go to Hispanics with a tangible, but they won't come to black people with tangibles. And they take the black vote for granted. And what I also see is that they don't appreciate the black vote. Moreover, when it comes down to many of these people like Michelle Obama, they don't want to get in the face of the 60% of white women who voted for Donald Trump or the 30% of Hispanics. I mean, you have an issue, you should have that issue with white women who were supposed to come out and turn out for Hillary Clinton, but then turn around and voted for Donald Trump.
Right. And do you see a change in that this election, or you think Trump will get reelected? I personally believe he's going to get reelected.
I'm thinking that Trump is going to get reelected because the Democrats in 4 years have not really put together a platform. They have not put together an argument. And if you want to complain about Donald Trump being a racist and a bigot, that's just not enough, because you, in 8 years, you have not put together any sort of package of tangibles for your constituents. And if you don't put together a package of tangibles, then what incentive do voters have to come back to you? Because when they look at Biden, they see Obama yet again, and the same legacy that gave them no hope and no change. The same thing Hillary was promoting when she said she was going to preserve his legacy, which gave them no hope and no change. And as much as I do not like Donald Trump, and I do not believe he's qualified to be president of the United States, he is not really, he's giving you an alternative, and you're not bringing anything to the table in terms of tangibles or offers. You're just coming in talking about LGBTQ, you're talking about illegal.
And that's Joe Biden's number one priority, by the way. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to point that out, that he has stated that's his top priority.
So his top priority is 1% of the population, even though 20% of the country now is unemployed, and he wants to deal with illegal immigrants and give them benefits, even though 30 million people are unemployed. So he's not really offering anything to the American people, and he's not listening to the American people. And that's why his campaign is really struggling right now to get any sort of traction or momentum, because he's not bringing anything to the table. And what's really sad is your people on the left had 4 years to come up with a plan, but instead they just spent their time making ad hominem attacks against your President Trump and trying to demonize him instead of coming up with a comprehensive plan where they present their platform and what they're going to offer the American people.
Amen. I agree with that wholeheartedly, Brother Shawn. And certainly somebody is watching, so please say something in the chat box if you're here. Shawn is here to talk about screenwriting, but we're talking about other things too just now, and we'll get right into it. And no, Shawn, I agree with you 100%. They have not offered any tangibles. They have not offered any plan. And unfortunately, what we're going to get still is a condescending tone like what Michelle Obama did. And also not just Michelle Obama, but the Congressional Black Caucus that has been a failure in my eyes for the last 30 years that or more, due to the fact that they have not demanded, not even just reparations, but in general, in stronger enforcements and tangibles for African Americans, stronger economic deals. We're talking about redevelopment in areas. We have areas across the country, like every city right now that you know of has, and I hate to say the word, but everyone has a ghetto. And someone designates where said persons or said parties are supposed to live and who is not supposed to have what. And it's like, who says this? Who determines where I'm supposed to live and I can't have a grocery store there, a decent grocery store to shop at? I don't have a mall. I live in New Orleans East area, which was one of the most elegant, extravagant areas you could live in New Orleans back in the day. If you came here 20 years, 25 years ago or so, everybody was moving out here. They had the mall, they had movie theaters. Now we got nothing. The top grocery store is Walmart, and people are excited about that. That's all you want? I'm sorry, we can do better.
Yeah, we can, but the whole thing is that a lot of these things that they build are based on them getting these government grants and these tax credits, and Once those tax credits dry up, what happens is those corporations wind up removing that property, and they'll say that it's not performing in proportion to other stores, and they'll pull it. So they're not really interested in building anything in poor communities and ghettos because they can't really get any sort of money from the government to subsidize it. So what they're looking for are tax credits. They're looking for grants. And this was what happened in Harlem here back in the late 90s, early 2000s. We had them build a Pathmark. We had them build a Krispy Kreme and a bunch of other chain stores when Bill and Hillary Clinton were building the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone. And by about 2009, 2010 or so, all of those stores were practically decimated, and soon they all practically closed. I mean, the first one to close was Krispy Kreme back in 2001, but then over time we had all of these stores, Human Bookstore, all these stores close, and they all closed because there was that empowerment zone money was no longer there. The politicians were no longer interested in gentrifying the neighborhood anymore. And they pushed out all of the local businesses that were there to bring in these chains. But then after the chains got their government money, they decided to close those stores. And that's what led to a huge hole being in many of these neighborhoods.
Yes, sir. You're right about that. And so I even noticed that when I watched Showtime at the Apollo, I saw the difference how you had mostly black artists there, mostly blacks in the crowd. Now you started seeing more and more whites come out
Yeah.
there, especially white artists. And when they did the new show, I noticed they would even have this is just to say, like more and more white guest who it was just watered down. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the Apollo I grew up with Sinbad.
No, it had its soul stripped away. It was made for primarily white audiences. It was not reflecting black culture.
Yeah, most definitely. So, oh, I put this in the wrong box. I'm sorry. Hold on a second. Yeah, so Shawn, getting into our subject, Screenwriting 101, and the state of, I wanted to talk about some black screenwriters per se. What do you think are the thoughts? And anybody that has any questions, please leave them in the chat box so Shawn and I can answer them, or I could give them to Shawn and he can answer as best as he can. What do you think is the state right now? We've talked about black cinema, but how hard is it? Because I know you're a screenwriter. I know you told me you wrote a teleplay once for a series.
Yeah, that's all about Nikki. I wrote this back in 2010, and it's been around since 2011. And It's an international hit on ebook. So,
okay, cool. So Okay. So, what are your thoughts now about screenwriters as far as black screenwriters getting into the business? I've read the story. Most people are familiar of Eric Monty. May not be familiar. Eric Monty was the creator of co-creator of Good Times and What's Happening. And I saw how he sued Norman Lear because Norman Lear didn't give him credit for creating, I believe, the Jeffersons as well, because he created those characters. He wrote the episode in All in the Family that introduced George and Louise Jefferson and with Lionel. And he actually ended up being homeless. He had maybe one screenplay that he wrote, teleplay he wrote for Moesha, which wasn't that great. So, would you tell everybody what is the state of black screenwriters right now, in your opinion?
well, when it comes down to black screenwriters, it's a very sad state. I mean, it's a very rough business overall for any writer, but it's a very extremely rough business for black writers because when it comes down to Hollywood, they really don't have any interest in hiring black writers. They have no real interest in the work of black writers. So the few that are there, they're only there because they fit a narrative. Somebody like a Tyler Perry or a Kenya Barris, they're there.
Malia White.
Yeah, they're there because they fit this narrative that they want for whatever black media they want to present. And that's the main reason why they have jobs right now. I mean, guys like this, they're out there to promote these narratives as related to black people being these buffoons, these loudmouths, or these scared black folks like on Kenya Barris's Black AF. They don't mind you if you're going to go out here and push and promote stereotypes about black people, because that's what these whites on the left in Hollywood want to see. So they'll hire those guys to meet their diversity quotas. They'll hire a black writer to fit their diversity boxes, check off their diversity boxes, but they're not going to really look to hire a serious black writer or a group of black writers. Even Tyler Perry doesn't look for black writers because he has a chance to hire a writer's room, and he has no interest in hiring black writers. So it's a very tough business overall for any black person to break in. And I found that out the hard way when I was trying to go out here and do the queries for All About Maryland, is that it's a very tough business. And eventually a lot of people, they want to come into the business, but they find themselves dealing with so much resistance that they have to wind up leaving because they just can't make any progress.
Yeah. Let me ask you, have you ever tried to submit your screenplays, any screenplays that you've had to a major studio?
I have tried, but the process is next to impossible. I mean, the whole thing is most of the businesses, they really don't want to talk to anybody overall because Hollywood is very paranoid, but they also they don't want any black screenplays or screenplays with black characters, because there's this whole notion that if a project is quote unquote black, it won't make any money. So when it comes down to screenwriting, it's very hard for me. It was hard for me to get anything through. And when I was submitting the screenplay contest, I dealt with so much hostility. It wasn't funny. I mean, a lot of people did not like the idea. Well, in a scene in All About Maryland where the white girl beats up Marilyn, and they didn't like that scene because they really want to keep the white woman's image elevated as this bright and friendly and positive. And they don't like the idea of the white woman being seen as a villain in any sort of scenario. So they were really upset about that one scene in the first act of All About Maryland, where I showed the black actress getting attention because she was on the set of this movie that she had advocated for, but they had taken the movie that she had advocated for many years ago and they gave it to white people, and they actually gave it to this white actress, and she was upset about this. And I wanted to make the point that people were remembering the Marilyn from the TV show, but this woman, because she was so insecure, she wanted to hurt Marilyn for the whole thing about her getting all this attention. So they don't really like anything that makes white women look bad, and they don't like anything that makes white people look bad. And then when it comes down to Hollywood, when you put up kind of stories that really critique the white community, they don't really like those type of stories. So
yeah.
So when I would go out here and try to query for that story, I couldn't really get any traction. I'll leave a link to All About Maryland. But she had to leave Hollywood, and people, when I did queries for it, I just couldn't get any progress. So I just published it and moved on.
Right. And so All About Maryland, so you just published it as the book that was originally supposed to be a screenplay. What do you think also of, I saw what you talked about black, it's time for a black comic book hero, your video that you had written, and I wanted to ask you, one of the first black superhero movies I can remember was The Meteor Man, which was Robert Townsend's vehicle. And Robert Townsend obviously, is a big Hollywood screen, black, one of the first groundbreakers we had in the 80s with his movies Hollywood Shuffle, and then Robert Townsend's Partner in Crime on HBO. And then he did the Meteor Man movie that he did, as well as having a predominantly all-black cast, which was the first of its kind. But what was huge about it was he was able to get a major Hollywood studio to put up money behind it. Nowadays, I don't know if you could make a screenplay like that. And I'm hearing that even the Black Panther, they're telling me not to be playing that character again, and they're making it a vehicle for the females that were in there. Have you heard that?
I've heard those rumors about Black Panther, but nothing is confirmed. So I have to wait till something is confirmed before I can make a comment
Sure.
on Black Panther. But on Robert Townsend, they were taking a risk on him because of his success with Hollywood Shuffle and the fact that black movies at that time were very popular. So they were looking to take that risk on Robert Townsend at the time, and it wouldn't have happened. The whole thing is Hollywood Shuffle was all him spending his own money on those credit cards, and he made that film himself, and he wouldn't have gotten to that point if he had not took a risk on himself. So everything was on him, and he took a risk on it. And
Right.
we are ready for more black superheroes, but the whole thing is the mainstream does not want to push black superheroes because, one, they don't want to push black superheroes because they don't want black, not black children, but white children looking up to black people as heroes. And two, they don't like the idea of the image of a black man or a black woman being elevated above a white person, because when they created comic books and superheroes during the 1930s, they created them to elevate white people's image and create the idea of a white Superman. And they were not interested in trying to make black people appear to be strong and powerful. And when they make these superhero movies, it's all about them elevating black people. If you look at the way Netflix did Luke Cage, I mean, Luke Cage was showing us an image of a strong, masculine, heterosexual black man who was looking out for his community, and they immediately pulled that show off the air just as Luke Cage was becoming a black man looking to take power in his community. So when they see narratives like that, what they do is they try to pull those shows. Same thing they did with Static Shock in 2004. It was a #1 show on Kids WB, but the whole thing is they are all about promoting the image of a white person, and they want the image of the white person to be the face of their characters, the face of their networks, the face of their media, and they have no interest in it, but there is a market for black characters and black media. I mean, I've seen it when I go out here and promote books like John Haynes' The Man with Nothing to Lose. When I promote books like this and books like ISIS, The Main Event, people come out for them. So there are people who want to see black heroes, but mainstream
Right.
companies, they don't want to give you black heroes.
Right. I definitely agree with that part. I know for a fact, very interesting since we talked about Robert Townsend, Bill Cosby, since we talk about him a lot, was in that movie. And he did that movie for scale, I believe. He didn't want to ride up any cost on Robert Townsend with that movie because they had given him $1 million, multi-million-dollar budget, and he knew the importance of it. And so, why I bring that up to is that you haven't heard Robert even speak up in defending Cosby or anything like that. And Rob actually directed Bill Cosby's last comedy special that Netflix didn't release as of yet. So I thought that was an interesting note.
Yeah, but Robert's trying to protect his spot in Hollywood, and that's why he's not saying anything.
Yeah, well, he actually, I have seen the Black Lightning series. I have been watching it, and I know you told me you don't watch it anymore because of the identity agenda that they push. And speaking of identity agenda, I think from what I know you're talking about, Marvel had the comic books that came out. I can't think of the name of it. The new that had the black male characters or two black characters that were either gay or
That was Snowflake and Safe Space. They were
Snowflake and
John
Space.
Vineberry, and the other one was Effeminate.
But what was the name of the comic book?
The New Warriors.
The New Warriors. Okay. Yeah, was definitely part of that agenda, and you saw that in Black Lightning. But when you mentioned Luke Cage, one of the things I discovered though, Luke Cage actually, they had canceled. Netflix had some type of issue with Disney, which owns Marvel Comics, and so I believe that was the reason why they pulled all of the Marvel comic series that
It was one
they
of
had
them.
on Netflix specifically. That was one of the reasons. But you think specifically the Luke Cage character was just too black for everyone to see?
He was not fitting their narrative, so that was one of the main reasons I believe that his series was pulled, because he was presenting this narrative. Because Chio Hodari Coker, he subversively slipped this narrative in where Luke Cage was this strong, masculine, heterosexual black man who was leading his community and being the strong leader that it needed. And they didn't like that idea. I mean, if Luke Cage was a bumbling, stumbling idiot, I believe that Disney and Netflix would have no problem running that show. I mean, if he was a jive time black guy, they'd have no problem with having him on the air. But their issue was that narrative primarily. Now, they did have issues with other things, but I believe Luke Cage was canceled primarily because of that.
Too black for you, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't put that past them. I mean, we had TV shows. I look at TV shows that were positive back in the day. The last time we talked, when you look at the TV show Rock, Rock actually was a very positive show. You know, back in the day, New York Undercover had social issues that they talked about, and before Malik Yoba went all crazy and so forth with the stuff he did on the Breakfast Club. He portrayed a strong black male lead, something that we didn't see, and it had a hip hop R&B twist to it. And since I mentioned that, Andre Harrell, who passed away over the weekend, may he rest in peace. He's from obviously creating Uptown Records. Do you have any memories of him?
I don't have many memories of him because I didn't grow up in a home listening to too much of his kind of music.
Okay. All right. Well, he was actually a producer. Part of the deal he had, I believe, with RCA, I was just reading, he got a chance to get into movies. And one of the movies he made was Strictly Business, which was a breakout role, or one of the first roles Halle Berry had.
I have that on DVD.
You do? Okay, yeah. There was Tommy Davidson was in it. He was hot off of In Living Color. And the guy who was in The Cosby Show, Joseph C. Phillips. Yeah, right. Yeah, he was in there too. He played the straight character. By straight, I mean he was a straight man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to say that now. So moving on with some screenwriting and so forth. How does one start writing a script?
Well, you have to learn the format for scripts, and that's done primarily through two books, Sid Field's Screenplay and Robert McKee's Story. And you also get yourself a template for screenplays off Microsoft Word. So once you've read Sid Field's Screenplay, it's going to help you understand the model for screenwriting and the 3-act paradigm. And then when you get Robert McKee's Story, you're going to learn a little bit of something about story. And in addition to that, you have to read a lot of screenplays. I started out by reading Training Day, Monsters Ball, and a whole bunch of other screenplays. I would just sit down and read screenplays so I could learn how story works as related to that format, because story works very differently on a screenplay than it does a novel. Now, a prose novel, you have all of this space to write your story, but in a screenplay, there are rules, and each page is like a minute of screen time. So you have to use the fewest amount of words when you're telling your story. So you cannot use a lot of words for paragraphs and build for your scenes. You have to go out here and make your scenes by saying something like, for example, I'm going to go into all about Nikki, like on this fade in for this episode. It says, let me see, this is the episode I did. This is episode 7. It says, you fade in, the interior, we're in Beverly Hills High's hallway in the morning, and it's a busy morning. Students are headed down the hall to the class. Nikki Desmond and Candace Collins, 16, a pair of spoiled rich sisters in designer clothes, stand next to their lockers getting their books for the next class. And Candace asks, and then you go into the dialogue box, and everything is about action. When you're doing screenplays, it's all about action. Action defines character. Action moves the story forward, and you want to keep the story moving forward in your screenplay, and you want people to keep turning pages until they get to the end. And then you want to make sure that your story is complete. So usually a screenplay, because a page is a minute, each page, you're going to go from about 90 to 120 pages for a feature film, or you're going to go about 20, 25 pages for a teleplay. They usually break it up even more into about 40 or 42 pages, but that's supposed to be 20 to 25 minutes of screen time for a teleplay.
So basically, it's a lot of detail. You got to be specific with scenery, the type of characters you're going to have, the clothes that they're going to wear if that plays a central figure in it, things of that nature. And that
Well,
can,
it's a very condensed form of writing. It's very, very condensed, and you have to know what you're writing because you don't have that much space on the page. For example, when you're doing a screenplay, the formatting is very, very different. Like with this, if you look at it, if you go pick the book up on Amazon, the formatting is like this on the inside. So your dialogue takes up these spaces, but your descriptions have to be very limited and people have to be able to see what you're putting together based on the little few amount of words you're putting down. So if you've got it's like basically a small paragraph, and even in case of training day, they only had like a sentence. So I have to set up a scene very quickly. I have to set up a scene in a very small amount of words so that people know, okay, this is what this scene is setting up to be. This is what these characters are. This is what the setting with these characters are. And then I have to go right into the characters and the dialogue. So in this paragraph where I talk about the characters, I give you that description, Nikki Desmond and Candace Collins, a pair of spoiled rich sisters. That's telling me who the characters are, and where they are at is in the hallway. So that's all you're going to get, and you have to use that in order to go out here and build your scene, and then go into your dialogue. And your dialogue can't be that long.
okay. So I'm just putting up the title of the book you had here. I believe I'm sharing it with everyone on StreamYard. This is called Sitfield Screenplay. Is this the one you're talking about?
Yes, that's the one I'm talking about.
Newly revised. I'm gonna see if they have a Kindle version of it. But okay, that's Sinfield Screenplay, and it's old. It says here it's over 388 pages long, which that's fine if you're you're interested in learning about this stuff. This is what you
Well,
got
that's
to
an
do.
essential book. That's
Yeah,
essential
and the
reading.
other book you said is Story,
Yeah, Robert McKee's story.
Robert McKee's Story. So I'm just gonna show everyone right quick. They could get. I'll put this in the link so everyone can look at it. So that way they'll have an opportunity to go to Google Books or go to Amazon.com so they can look this up. And let's see here. Robert McKee's Story. Okay, and it's on Audible. All right. Oh, there you go. Robert McKee, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
there are two essential books for screenwriting.
yeah. There you go. I got a free book. Yeah, so everyone check those out. Robert McKee's Story and Sitfield by forgot the guy's names. Damn it, I just had his name. What's his name again? Shawn, I'm sorry.
His screenplay, Robert McKee's story.
Sitfield by Sitfield wrote Screenplay. Okay, see, I see it right now. Sitfield is the both name, is the whole name. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, Shawn, let me ask you this: since we're in screenwriting now, I just want to know your opinion on how long does it take you uh, to write a screenplay?
Well, All About Maryland took me about a year to put together, and then another year or so to revise before my computer died. So it takes anywhere from a year to 3 years. And I had other screenplays I've done, like Spray 'Em Up, and that one took me another year or so. It takes a long time to put together a screenplay because you're working with different formatting rules, working with different story, a different story model, and you have to make things work within a set of rules because you have a completely different story model than you would for a novel. I mean, for a screenplay, you have the inciting incident where you have this event that really draws the viewer in. And in that inciting incident, you have your main character. You're presenting what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, and what obstacles are in their way. And most importantly, the reason why we need to care to watch the story. And that's supposed to build into plot point one, which is the end of the first act. Then you open up the second act, and then you have to keep building on the events that were established in the story and the obstacles that are in the way, the things the character is supposed to learn. And then you go into plot point two, and then you go into the third act, then you go into the climax, then you go into the conclusion. So there's a set of rules for writing a screenplay, and it's very tough to learn how to write in those rules because you have to watch your page counts, you have to watch what type of action you're putting in each scene, how long the dialogue is going to go, because sometimes we can go on and ramble in a novel. You can have a person talking for a paragraph, but in a screenplay, you have to keep it very simple because your character's dialogue, if it goes too long, it's going to wind up pulling the reader out of the story. So you have to be very careful about how you set up your scenes. You have to be able to set up things as related to your slug lines and things like that, because a slug line lets us know that where a scene is starting, and you have to learn how all those different pieces work before you. And it takes a while to learn it because it's a very steep learning curve before you can master this. So it's a lot of techniques that you have to learn, and a lot of things you have to learn about screenwriting, and it takes a good long time to learn those things.
Yes. Yes. So is that something you, as a kid, that you started, like you always knew you wanted to be a writer, or how did that come about?
Well, I got into screenwriting because one of my family members said that my first book, Isis, reminded them of a screenplay. So they said that they were seeing it like a comic book or a movie in their head. So they offered me the screenplay book they had because they said it basically was in their head like a movie, and it read more like a screenplay than a novel. So I took the book and I learned some different techniques and I applied them. And then I started using that to write my first screenplay, All About Marilyn. And I also used it to improve my writing on books in the ISIS series and the John Haynes series. I used it to improve my skills. So screenwriting is something that has really helped me learn how to write better stories, faster stories, stories with better pacing, better character development, and be able to give you a story that is a lot tighter and more compact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm, as you know, interested in doing screenplays and screenwriting, but it's not an easy thing to do. A lot of people don't realize the type of work it take, have to put in a lot of work and hours behind that. I know as being a author, just you got to go through screenwrite, page rewrites. You have to proofread it. You have to, I guess, and first off, set out on what is it you're trying to do. I guess get an idea, because you may end up being all over the place. But sometimes that works for me. Like when I write my book, a book that I'm writing right now, I'm just thinking of new ideas like that, and I'm putting it in there and seeing where it goes. So, I mean, weird things have happened, but I've seen, Sylvester Stallone got started writing, in Hollywood when he wrote Rocky. He was on his last leg, uh, almost home at the point. I think he was also homeless, if I'm not mistaken, when he did that, and sold his dog so that he could eat. And I saw he wrote Rocky, I think in less than a week or so when he did that. Yeah, and he was steadfast on staying on as the actor, as the lead character, Rocky. Otherwise, because they all thought the script was great, but they didn't want him because he wasn't proven. But he proved otherwise.
Yeah, he was the only guy who could really play that role. So
Yeah, I couldn't see anybody playing that Rocky. Just like I can't see. What are your thoughts now? I want to ask you this. Since I'm bringing that up, there have been rumors of Chris Pratt taking over as Indiana Jones.
I just think they need to retire Indiana Jones. It's a concept that has run its course, and it's time to give Chris Pratt something more suited to him.
Yeah, I feel like Chris Pratt, he comes in, he takes over and does, all the comic book movies. He's got Jurassic World. and there's a new Jurassic Park that's coming out. I guess this will be the 6th film in the entry.
Yeah, well, I think it's time to move on past some of these older franchises and do something different.
I wasn't a fan of the last the last Jurassic World that they had. And I also thought with Star Wars, I thought that was an embarrassment, that last one.
Yeah. I think it's just time to move on. It's time to do new characters, new stories, stuff for this generation. That's what I was trying to do with All About Nikki. When I did this book, I was trying to do something new for today's generation. And I believe it's time for some new characters, and it's time for some new commentary, because people just keep making the same stories from 30 years ago. And that's why it's not resonating with people, because this stuff is so old that people go that's my granddad's characters. It's not my characters.
Yeah, I think definitely. Well, the reason what's behind that and why they keep pushing the Star Wars and the Indiana Jones is because it's a cash cow.
Yeah, I know it's a cash
license
cow.
To print money. They're
missing out on bigger paydays had they just created some new stuff. I mean, they're trying to play it safe, but you can't play it safe in the entertainment business. You have to take a risk, and you have to take a risk on some new characters, because these old characters have practically run their course. I mean, some of these characters are 35, 40, 45 years old, and kids just look at them and go, that's Dad's character. That's not me. That's not my life. That's not my experience.
Do you feel the same way about James Bond?
In some ways, yeah. I mean, James Bond is he's one of those iconic characters, but he's also starting to get up in age. I mean, it's just time for some new stuff, and it's just time unless you can come up with some fresh stories or some fresh concepts, it's just time to really move past some of these older characters, because people just don't relate to them anymore.
Yeah, the only other thing I can think of is if they killed if they did like Logan, and they killed the character, but I mean, you can't kill James Bond.
No, you can't kill him, but you can try to do something to make
retire
it fresh.
him. Yeah,
you can make it fresh. The
make
thing
it fresh.
Making a character fresh means you put some fresh takes on the character.
Yeah,
fresh stories, and they're afraid to do that. They're afraid to. The thing is, they want to try to make these characters like they were in the 60s, but that's 50, 60 years ago. It's time to look at the 2020 world and make stuff for the 2020 world and 2020 kids, because the 2020 kids, they look at some of this stuff and they're like, this is ridiculous.
Well, they're actually trying to make, as well as because I saw your video on it, they tried to emasculate James Bond by bringing in the female character who has the new 007 mantra. And there was a big controversy over that because they put James Bond into the Me Too world now. And I know that Pierce Brosnan, who played James Bond for 4 films, his last one wasn't that great, died another day, but he talked about himself trying to see a gay James Bond, which I don't think will go over with hardcore traditional fans, and I think that they've watered down that character more and more because I thought Daniel Craig, though, has done a phenomenal job from where it was, but I feel that putting this into the Me Too era and so forth and watering it down has just got a lot of hardcore fans upset. And I know you had some not choice words, but you had something to say about it.
Yeah, but this James Bond, the whole thing is you can do a fresh James Bond in this era, but the whole thing is that they just don't want to take the risk to do a fresh James Bond. I mean, the whole thing is people like this character, but it's just how you approach this character to make him fresh and exciting. I mean, I can see a way to make James Bond a very interesting character. I can see a way to keep him you can still have him being suave and sophisticated. And you can still have the ladies after him, but he's not chasing it's not like he's chasing the ladies. The ladies are coming after him.
Right. But how do you feel about this now being in a Me Too era that they're changing the character? Where you obviously didn't like it, or?
No, I didn't like it because they were going to put these woke progressive ideas in there, and they were going to try to force this passive aggressive masculinized black woman and try to make it where the woman was trying to fit into the man's role. I mean, if you want to do a new 007, you don't do it that way, because all you're going to do is promote a racist stereotype about black women and not give us a compelling character. So when I looked at the way they were approaching James Bond, I saw that they weren't really about giving us a new 007. They were trying to passive aggressively take a shot at black women by saying that they were masculine, they acted like men, and that's an insult towards black women.
Yeah. I also thought, what about this being an opportunity to show the black character that they had, Felix Leiter, because I know Felix wasn't black in the original series, but he basically was the American friend to James Bond, and now Daniel Craig's taking over Jeffrey Wright as that character. And I think we're going to see him in this movie, if I'm not mistaken, which is No Time to Die.
Yeah. But I just think that if you want to create a black character, just create a black character, give him his own movie, let him have his own gadgets, let him have his own team. But they don't want to do that because they don't want to have somebody take over for James Bond. They want to keep James Bond as number one. But if you want a success, you're going to have to create a new black character.
Right. Well, who's the guy? I can't think of his name. The gentleman that created Shaft, which is in the 70s.
That was Gordon Parks.
Well, Gordon Parks directed it, but he didn't create the character. The guy who created it, if I can find his name right quick, or I'll find it. But it was a white man who created it in Shaft. Actually, from my understanding, he was not the first blaxploitation character. I know they throw that term out a lot, but it was Sweetback's Badass Song that was the first blaxploitation movie that Van Peebles did. But Shaft was created by Ernest. I have it here. Just give me 1 second. Gosh, my internet is slow. Okay. It's trying to load. Okay, yeah. Ernest Tideman, yes. And he created the character as being black. How do you feel about white screenwriters that create strong black male roles or things like that when you have a white screenwriter, let's say, for instance, that made The Color Purple, and there were no blacks that were behind the screenwriting process? Same thing with Django Unchained, one best original screenplay. Quentin Tarantino wrote that.
I'm not a fan of that, because if you want to really give us a compelling story, you really need a black screenwriter to write that story. I mean, there's certain things about black culture that really solid black screenwriters know. And when we have white screenwriters writing our culture and our history, they are prone to putting stereotypes in our stories. So I'm not a fan of white writers writing black characters, because oftentimes when they come on the scene, they like to push stereotypes, they like to put stereotypes in, they like to project stereotypes onto black characters, and they really don't understand the culture, they don't understand the nuances, and there are things that black writers know. And I had a friend of mine on Facebook, he was telling me that when I do my stories, that he could see things that I would put into the stories that would make them feel more real to him and the life experiences he knew. I mean, for example, with this book, Easting the Sands of Time, I mean, he was talking about how I had put a scene in there with a Whitney Houston song, and it resonated with him. And people, they see the story, and because I put things in there as related to black culture and the black experience. So when you have a black writer, they're going to give you a richer picture, a broader picture of the black experience that a white writer would not give you. A white writer, they're going to come in and they're going to try to write our stuff, but they're not going to know the culture. They're not going to know our history. They're not going to know things about us. And they're going to give us things like with Color Purple, where we just got all this misandry and all this black man hatred. And that really destroyed that movie, because it was like, you made this so-called great movie, but this movie was just, it demonized black men. And the whole thing is that
right. I mean, that Danny Glover character was a bastard. I mean,
he was a black brute.
He was a brute, and of course, they had over themes back then of lesbianism that were in there, that you saw. You saw basically the men were basically shown as weak. And in general, I know we're talking about black screenwriters. I see that even I was watching the last Halloween movie with my dad. They make men stupid in these type of movies because in that movie, if you saw the last Halloween movie, did you see it, Shawn?
I didn't see it.
Okay, well, if you go watch it, just watch how the men are portrayed as opposed to the women. In particular, I don't want to give it away, but one of the father's daughter is missing while Michael Myers is out killing people, and he's playing around with a fucking yo-yo. uh,
But they do that in these movies because they want to make the black person appear to be incompetent.
well, he wasn't black; he was white, but
yeah.
But I'm just talking about men overall. They try to put men in a negative light, but black males in particular, we get it the worst, and certainly we're put as incompetent in these movies or buffoonish. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And since I brought up Shaft, I wanted to let you know the last Shaft movie that they had with Richard Roundtree appeared though at the end of the movie, and Samuel Jackson was in it as well as Jesse T. Usher. People thought Jesse T. Usher that I talked with, they didn't care for him per se. But I'm looking here. The screenwriter for that Shaft movie was Alex Barno and Kenya Barris. Your favorite screenwriter?
Yeah, two guys who gave us beta male Shaft and practically destroyed that movie at the box office.
It underperformed. Yeah, it was. I think it only made, from what I'm reading, it only made $21 million on a $30 million budget.
Yeah, but they just gave us this weak, emasculated man, and that's why people aren't going to go see these movies because they want to see strong, masculine men. They want to see a man that they will have traits that they can relate to and identify with, and things they want to emulate.
So you did see the last Shaft?
I didn't see it. I saw the trailer, and it turned me off.
Okay.
When I saw
they made it more comedy. Yeah.
The whole thing is nobody wants to see a comedy with Shaft. People think of Shaft as an action hero.
Right. The last Shaft movie that John Singleton made was pretty good. What he made with Peoples Hernandez and so forth, it was action drama. And then when you look at this, they made it more an action comedy than anything. And one of the great things I remember about 90s movies, this movie had a great soundtrack. But back in the day, as you know, when you had these black movies, they also had a banging soundtrack, something you don't get anymore too often. Oh, you can chime in, Shawn.
Yeah. What was the question again?
I said I was just making a statement about how soundtracks used to be in movies like Dead Presidents, which was made by the Hughes brothers, as well as just house party movies, things of that nature.
Well, they used to sell records, and that soundtrack was how they made a little bit more on the box office. But a lot of these movies, they're not really focused on the production as a whole. They're not thinking about how the music fits in. They're not thinking about how the visuals come together. They're just thinking they want to slap something together to make some fast money. So they're not really thinking about how everything works together and how everything flows together. And that's why a lot of these films they don't work the way they should. It used to be they would be producing the record, the soundtrack at the same time they were making the film, and they would want all the pieces to work together so that they could synergize and sell both the movie and then sell the soundtrack later on.
Okay.
That's what they do with Saturday Night Fever, and that's how they made a ton of money.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, I mean, even before that, what Curtis Mayfield did with Superfly, that actually outsold the movie itself.
That's what happened a lot in the 90s. A lot of the times, the movies would outsell the soundtrack would outsell the movie.
Right. Oh, yeah, most definitely. Definitely, I know, like Dead Presidents, they recycled all of the 70s soundtracks 20 years ago, and with James Brown and Curtis Mayfield and Isaac Hayes, who did the Shaft score and soundtrack, by the way, which was banging. And you know, they don't make classics like that anymore. I had a conversation one time with the brother who wrote Menace to Society. And Menace to Society, for those that don't know that are going to be watching this later, back in the 90s, that was a classic old 1993 gangster movie.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's tired.
No, yeah, I am. I've been working all day, so.
All right, don't worry. We're not going to be much longer, bro. It's good. Yeah. But Menace to Society was written by Tiger Williams. Tiger actually hadn't written a screenplay in almost 20 something years before he did the latest movie with Sanaa Lathan and Michael Ealy, which was, I can't think of the name, it came out in 2013. But that movie, I actually had a conversation with him about writing a screenplay. That movie was called, sorry guys, I'm trying to get this quicker. Filmography. But she had The Perfect Guy. That was in 2015. So almost 22 years he hadn't written a screenplay. And, you know, and this was coming off of writing Menace to Society. And I didn't know whether or not perhaps he just went into another venture, whether it was just he just had no interest in it. But you can see sometimes, I guess, when you have a brother who writes a screenplay, you've seen people that may be one and done with these things, like they may never have any interest in it. What keeps you going to keep you moving when you get, you know, a no? When you get when someone let me rephrase that. When someone says we don't want this, and you keep going next door, how do you not give up? Why do you keep on trying? What drives you?
Well, what drives me is I just want to get a sale on a project. So sometimes I understand in this business that, yeah, you can write one screenplay, but you always have to have others that you're working on. And what motivates me to keep writing is that one thing that God had told me to keep going back in 2008. And another thing is I just want to just be able to write quality stories. And I don't think that I am finished writing stories right now. I mean, I have a whole bunch of stories in my head, and I'm not really finished with writing something. And one of the things I learned from screenwriting is, and writing overall, is you just don't want to stop at one project, because if you have one project that's a hit, what's going to happen is people are going to call you and ask you, what's your next project? And you really want to have something in your box that you can offer them, so that when they come to you, like when Bill Cosby had the Cosby Show back in '84, he could come to them and say, I've got a different world. So when you go out here, you want to have.
Don't tell Spike Lee that.
Yeah, but that was the reason why Bill Cosby was able to get stuff done, because he had 20 million viewers on the Cosby Show. And those executives came to him and asked him, well, what do you have next? And he said, look, I've got a different world. So when I go out here, I don't want to just have one book, and just because I know that people, once you get a book sold, you need to have something else in the pipeline so that you can pitch that. And people don't do that because they don't really see it as a business. They're just thinking, oh, I'll just get this one screenplay sold. But this is a business. And once you have sold one product, you have to have something else in the pipeline. For example, when I did All About Marilyn, I said I'm going to do an All About Nikki book to show the show that Marilyn was on, and I wanted to have something to back that up. So I always want to make sure I have something to back it up, so I can have something in the pipeline, so that when people ask me, okay, you've had this Temptation of John Haynes, it's a critically acclaimed hit, what else do you have? I can go to them and I can say, I've got this All About Nikki, I've got the ISIS series, and I've got books like the Spinsterella trilogy. I've got material that's ready to go and ready to pitch. So that's one of the things that keeps me motivated with writing overall, is that you just don't write just one story, because in publishing, you can have a period where one book will sell very well for a long time, then it will die. So you want to have more than one or two books out there so that those books are generating revenue. And you also want to have more than one intellectual property, because the more properties you have out there, the more opportunities you have to pitch them and license them for other forms of media.
You keep the fire hot.
Yeah.
That's right.
You want to have fresh stuff available all the time. So you don't want to just have one book out here, because if you come out with one book, like J.K. Rowling, yes, she has Harry Potter, but she doesn't have anything else. Same thing with Stephanie Meyer in Twilight. So if somebody contacts them and says, hey, what do you have
need
next?
Anything else?
There's nothing there, and there's no way for them to make money or them to license other properties. So this is how you build wealth, by having more than one property. The more properties you have, the more wealth you have overall as related to selling and licensing your intellectual property.
But did J.K. Rowling need anything else with Harry Potter? I mean, it's a franchise of its own.
It's a franchise, but these franchises depreciate over time, and that's why you want to have more than one, because sometimes you have a group of fans, they get older and they're going to fade, and eventually they'll phase out, and then you don't have anything to back it up. So you want to have more than one set of intellectual properties. And when you can create more than one, it actually increases your value as a writer, because when you have more than one concept, they know they can count on you to be someone who they know will be able to give them a fresh and different take on things, and not just give them the same stale stories over and over again. Because when you're a one-trick pony and you created one concept, it doesn't make you an asset as related to publishing and media. But when you can create 2, 3, 4 different concepts, it makes you an asset, because they know that you can make more than one type of show. You can do it, like I can do a comedy, I can do a drama, I can do science fiction, I can do fantasy, I can explore concepts like the goth subculture or vampires. I can explore these different concepts, and when you have more than one concept, it makes you an asset that people will be able to say, hey, we know who can write that story for us, or who can develop that concept for us. We know we can bring him in because he has a range. But when you only write one story, it makes it where you're not going to be able to sell that many scripts long term.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'm looking at this brother here, Tiger Williams, Tiger. I was just talking about, who wrote Menace to Society, which was a critically acclaimed commercial hit. It grossed nearly $27.9 million on a $3.5 million budget. He had pitched throughout those years, over 22 years, film and television deals with Sony and Fox and Showtime and HBO, as well as Universal and Warner Brothers. And he wrote 30 screenplays, more than 30 screenplays. Films like Gridiron Girls, a football version of A League of Their Own for Queen Latifah at New Line, a Foxy Brown remake that Halle Berry fell apart the morning after she won Best Actress for Monsters Ball. In other words, he had that written, and then they decided, well, she's a big-time Oscar winner. Doing a Foxy Brown remake isn't going to cut it for us, kid. So, but he took him 22 years before finally he was able to get one of his screenplays, The Perfect Guy, made. He sold it to Screen Gems, and eventually it got to Sanaa Lathan, and he worked on another draft, and it became the #1 box office movie, I think, for that weekend in 2015, and he was back there. So it's just a matter of how long you're willing to keep up, and whether you're taking the hits and keep moving forward. Yeah. So
you have to have material out there to sell, and that's the tough part about screenwriting, is that you have to have more than one script. So you might pitch one script and it gets turned down. You might pitch another script and it gets turned down. But as long as you've got material, you can go out here and be able to have something to pitch and be able to try to get it sold with your agent. But the whole thing is that a lot of writers, they want to think they can go on one script and then write another one later on, but you have to have stuff ready to go because you're going to ask for it.
So basically, I take it, Shawn, you write every day.
Yeah.
Never have a day off?
I spend most of my time making videos and promoting these days. I do a lot of editing these days. I have editing Eternal Night right now, and I'm editing 2 of the 2021 books that I just wrote 2 months ago. I wrote Isis: Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. I just finished that one about 2 weeks ago, and John Haynes, Taking Care of Business, which I finished earlier. I have one more Easting book I have to do, but I write close to every day, but I'm also doing videos. I'm doing editing. I just wrote a new blog just yesterday. It's on Patreon for my patrons regarding something related to Isis: Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. So I'm always working every day, and if I'm not writing, I'm editing. If not editing, I'm revising. I've always got multiple projects going, and
Right.
it's a lot because the whole thing is you might have one project that sells well, and you might have one project that sells slow. So
Are
you
you
have to
screen?
have more than one book out there every year, because when it comes down to books, you have one book that'll get sold, like Man Crisis, that'll sell well, and then you'll have other books that will struggle, and it's just part of the business. So that's why a lot of writers, we just produce as much product as possible, because one book will sell, another one won't sell, and the one that doesn't sell has to cover the cost. The one that sells has to cover the cost of the ones that doesn't sell or sell slowly.
Yeah, and I mean, you're not gonna, and you're doing this without an agent or a manager, I take it. So, you just got to keep promoting yourself daily. I mean, even with my books, I have to self-publish them because they want you to have, obviously someone like a Stephen King or a J.K. Rowling. They had an agent that was willing to look at their material and be supportive of them. And sometimes when you do a subject matter, like I do nonfiction stuff,
Yeah.
I know that it may not be as great or something that they want because they try to push a certain, get the population to believe in a certain agenda. The same thing they do with television, with movies and shows that they have. They want to indoctrinate society in a certain agenda, as we've talked about. So, Shawn, I'm not going to keep you any further, but I do have one question. Are you writing some screenplays now? I know you're editing and writing books, but are you open to doing more screenplays?
I would be open to doing more screenplays, but I'm not doing screenplays right now because they're just very tough to sell. I mean, one of the reasons why I stopped doing screenplays back in 2011 was because they were really tough to sell. I came this close to getting All About Nikki made into a TV show. I talked to an actress. She signed a release because she saw some episodes on my LinkedIn page, and it came pretty close. I mean, this was an international hit all over the world. People were picking up the screenplays, and it came this close to being produced. But it's just so much work that goes into trying to get a script sold, and it's a lot of work, and a lot of work goes into, writing 13 episodes of a TV show or 100 and some odd pages of a screenplay. So it takes, again, close to a year because of the formatting and the rules. So I I would have to, again, the project would have to be good for me to get into it. But I would get into it depending on if I was compensated for my time and if the project was interesting enough. But most of the time, I'm focused primarily on, books like the ISIS series or the John Haynes series, or the no, East Team series, the John Haynes series and the ISIS series, because these are the books that they do okay, and my nonfiction, like the Man Crisis, because I can get those books out fairly quickly, and I can start getting sales. But with screenplays, it's just a lot of work, and it's not gonna really get me that big return in terms of getting sold. So it's really tough to sell a screenplay, especially for a black screenwriter who writes black content. So it would have to be something really special for me to get back into it.
Well, just keep on pushing, my man, and hopefully, you keep trying, man. Something's gonna break off.
All right,
I
well,
can,
we'll see.
yeah, I feel it, man, and you know, I'm here. I'm here all the time, man, and you're welcome to come on again as a guest. And if you need me to come on your program, I'm happy to do so. If I don't know what I would talk about, but just about anything. But this was great information, and we got to do this again because a lot of our people, we need more screenwriters. But most importantly, we need black film production. We need producers that will be willing to take a gamble and a chance on screenwriters, especially young black screenwriters like yourself and others, because we'll go into Hollywood to go to Warner Brothers or go to 20th Century Fox or whoever. It would be very difficult from time to time, unless you're a super talent like Eddie Murphy, who could get a movie pitched like that back in the day, like what he did with Coming to America uh, or some other movies. He did Vampire in Brooklyn, giving his brother a chance to write a screenplay, or Norbit, and things like that. He was just able to, do stuff like that. But, those come dime, once in a lifetime.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I would, if I got that type of break, I would take it, but it's very hard to get. So I'm just focusing on trying to build my career through the books that I do.
Yeah. Well, Shawn, I told people at the banner they can find you on your self-entitled YouTube channel, Shawn James.
Okay.
Any other stuff you want to plug? This is the time.
Well, you guys can pick up my latest SJS Direct 2020 books. ISIS, the main event, is now available on Amazon.com. I left the link in the chat. It's available in paperback and Kindle format. It's on Kindle Unlimited until about June. So you can, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. You can also pick up John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. And if you want to read a great story in the style of Disney princesses, you can pick up Eastine, The Sands of Time. People love this story, and I think you'll love it too. And if you want to get some great African-American comedy, this book, All About Nikki, was designed to be like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air meets Clueless. And I think you guys will really enjoy this. This is some fun family sitcom. I designed it to be like the old family sitcoms of the 1990s and the teen sitcoms of the 1990s. And I think you'll really enjoy this one. And this one is 13 episodes of a TV show. If I were to write a TV show, this is how I would write it. And if I were to do a TV show, this is how I would do it. So if you really want to see what one of my screenplays or my TV shows would look like, this is the book to get, along with the companion, All About Marilyn. All of these books are available on Amazon.com. You can pick them all up in paperback and Kindle formats. And I thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, thank you for coming, brother. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to end the broadcast, but I did want to talk with you privately. Everyone, this has been another episode of Gavin Richard Presents on my channel, Gbutu786. You guys, please subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to the Patreon that I have listed. Please donate to the channel at Gavin Richard Esquire through Cash App, as well as Google Pay, which is my email, gavin.grich1@gmail.com. Shawn, thank you again. And guys, we'll holler. We'll be back for another episode. Peace.
All right.